ABC 10 News at 5 starts right now.
ABC 10 News at 5 starts now.
Just kept finding them as the more I walked.
Less than 3 weeks after the November election, and there are some concerns being raised about voting after undelivered ballots and voter guides were found scattered in a San Diego neighborhood. Good evening, I'm Derek Stahl.
And I'm Kimberly Hunt. Steve and Lindsay have the night off. ABC 10 News reporter Mimi Alcala spoke with the Registrar of Voters about the plans in place to address these issues.
I was out walking the dogs and I found this stack of voter ballots. Looks ballot envelopes and then the voter guides.
Jeremy Alanick says he snapped these pictures in City Heights last week. He says he discovered the unvoted ballots and voter information pamphlets scattered around on 45th and Dwight Streets.
It was probably somewhere between 15 and 20. Just kept finding them as the more I walked. But I was just kind of furious.
Alanick says he didn't immediately report the incident because he was on a job walking dogs for a client, but he was working to get in touch with the Registrar of Voters on Wednesday.
I would have picked them all up and everything and then taken them to the post office, but, I'm thinking about the dogs and, that just wasn't running through my mind at that moment.
Registrar of Voters Michael Vu tells me while situations like this are uncommon, investigations are launched as soon as his office is aware.
We would certainly have the U.S. Postal Service involved.
He says if voters have concerns or haven't received their ballots in the mail, options are available.
When a voter says that they have not received their mail ballot, we have the ability to suspend that mail ballot and reissue them another one. There are voted mail ballots that come back to our office. We compare the signature off of the envelope against the signature on file too. So every single one of these are validated.
And if you are voting by mail, Vu also recommends tracking your ballot.
Voters themselves, they have the ability to track their mail ballot as it's traveling to them or traveling back to us after they have voted.
He says if you come across a situation like this, report it to his office right away. Mimi Alcala, ABC 10 News.
A spokesperson for the U.S. Postal Inspection Service tells ABC 10 News they're unable to comment on this matter.
Early voting across the U.S. is already causing controversy. As ABC's Marcy Gonzalez reports, long lines and battles over drop boxes are raising questions about possible voter suppression.
In city after city, lines snaking around buildings, voters eager to cast their ballots early, waiting as long as 9 hours in Georgia and Texas.
I'm willing to wait as long as it takes. And anything worth a reward is worth waiting for.
More than 11 million voters have already cast their ballots early, about 10% of the total turnout of the 2016 presidential election. Officials denying claims that scenes like this are a sign of voter suppression.
Some precincts are more favored by voters, and they just have longer lines. So everyone will have the opportunity to vote. We're just expecting record turnout.
Some voters hoping to avoid the long waits and concerned about in-person voting during this pandemic, facing different challenges. A federal court agreeing with the governor of Texas's decision to allow only one drop-off box for mail-in votes per county. A federal appeals court making a similar decision for drop boxes in Ohio.
The right to vote is critically important. It shouldn't be more difficult, especially during a pandemic.
And in California, confusion after the Republican Party set up more than 50 unofficial ballot drop boxes across the state and are refusing to follow orders to take them down.
Here's the big concern. This is what the ballot looks like when it goes back in. And on the back side of this is the name of the person who is delivering that ballot, who the voter is. And it's very easy for them to be able to see whether it is a Democrat or a Republican.
The state GOP says they are within the law and actually plan to add more ballot drop boxes. And across the country, with so many different voting rules and deadlines, voters can go to vote.org to learn how to make sure their ballot counts. Marcy Gonzalez, ABC News, Los Angeles.
Turning now to our weather. It was another hot day across the county, and this was the scene at La Jolla Shores. Lots of fun today as people tried to cool off and enjoy the sunshine. ABC 10 News meteorologist Angelica Campos is joining us now with a look at the numbers and how much longer the heat will stick around. Angelica?
Hi, Kim. Well, I guess the bad news first. The heat will continue through Friday. But as far as today, we actually did a little bit better than yesterday. Temperatures lowered anywhere from 5 to 7 degrees cooler. It's still hot, it's still above the average, and certainly these temperatures are way too uncomfortable, especially for this time of the year. But as we look at the temperatures, we did break a record and we tied one. The record we broke today was in Campo. We made it to 100 degrees. Right now it's 92. And also in Poway, we made it to 95 degrees, tying the same record. Around the county, we stayed pretty far from records in areas like Escondido, Ramona, so doing fairly well in that area. A heat advisory will stay in effect from the coast all the way to our foothills through Friday afternoon. And by the end of the day on Thursday, we'll begin tracking Santa Ana conditions. I'll have more on that in your 7-day forecast.
Angelica, thanks. Now to the coronavirus. President Trump says his 14-year-old son, Barron, is doing fine after testing positive for COVID-19. First Lady Melania Trump made the announcement today in an online essay. She said Barron initially tested negative after she and the president contracted the virus, but days later he tested positive without showing any symptoms. The president, the First Lady, and Barron have all since tested negative.
Here are the latest numbers for San Diego County. 303 new cases were reported today. That brings the total to 51,327. 4 more deaths were reported, bringing that death toll to 844. Point Loma Nazarene University is seeing a spike in COVID cases among students. As of this morning, the school reported 19 active cases, 14 of which are on campus. 66 of their students are now in isolation. The school has had 29 positive cases since August 1st. New cases have been traced back to 4 residential halls, which are now being monitored closely.
We will be deploying a surge testing capability to the campus tomorrow to test the remaining number of students who need to be tested.
PLNU says that students who tested positive have been moved from their dorms to other university housing for isolation. Students who live on the same floors as the positive cases are being told to shelter in place. This all comes on the heels of an outbreak at San Diego State, with more than 1,100 cases reported since the end of August. San Diego's first jury trial since the start of the pandemic is underway, but the courts are worried about the low turnout of potential jurors. ABC 10 News investigative reporter Jennifer Kastner found out that only a small number are showing up.
Civic duty continues to be strained by the coronavirus.
The system doesn't work without jurors.
On Wednesday, ABC 10 News interviewed San Diego Superior Court presiding Judge Lorna Alksny about this week's first criminal jury trial since all jury trials were halted in March.
We summoned 800 jurors. About 250 or so postponed their service, like we told them in the flyer to do if they felt uncomfortable or had a conflict or had a comorbidity or something like that. And of the remaining jurors, we called all of them in and only 41 showed. I mean, I can only anecdotally think that people are unsure about public transportation or coming back downtown to serve.
Wednesday marked day 2 of the trial, an elder abuse case. Judge Alksny said the courts have sufficient safety measures in place for jurors.
When they went back into the courtroom, then they have these plexiglass barriers in between them if they're less than 6 feet apart. And everybody wore masks. There's hand sanitizer everywhere. It's as safe as going to Costco.
The courts have maintained that the only way to address the backlog of cases is with cooperation from San Diegans who are called for duty.
What I told the jurors yesterday is if you had a loved one that was incarcerated pending trial and nobody showed up to do the jury trial, how would they ever get their day in court?
Another trial is scheduled for next week and 2 for the following week, with the numbers of summonses continuing to increase. Jennifer Kastner, ABC 10 News.
The court says there's no plan to penalize people who do not appear for jury duty, but that could change if turnout continues to be low.
It has now been 7 months since the pandemic began, and there are still a lot of questions about the best ways to treat patients with COVID-19. UC San Diego is now leading an effort to answer them. Doctors agree the best way to fight any disease is to tailor the treatment for each individual based on their age, their gender, their race, and other factors. But how does one doctor do that with a new disease like COVID-19, especially if their hospital has only seen a few hundred cases?
There might be some patterns you can get from 500 patients, but there might be some others that you cannot.
UC San Diego professor Dr. Lucila Ono Machado has a solution. Pool data. She's leading the charge behind COVID19questions.org, a collaboration between 12 medical systems spanning more than 200 hospitals across the country.
Each hospital is a little small to answer the questions. So by having it all together, we get it answers quicker.
They're going after answers on how long patients with diabetes or cancer stay in the hospital and whether COVID-19 is deadlier for smokers or non-smokers. Their findings revealed that men are much more likely to wind up on a ventilator than women. And they quantified just how much better we've gotten at treating COVID-19 over time. Since May 1st, hospital stays have gotten more than 10 days shorter on average. That's important for hospital managers planning and predicting bed space.
We decided to open this to the public and to our colleagues, and then we pick which answers have not been answered before and seem to be of most general interest.
If this sounds like a straightforward approach, it's not. Patient confidentiality laws make it hard for hospitals to share data, and the information released by the CDC is limited. The collaboration's research is based on what's called observational data. So Dr. Ono Machado says it's not a replacement for a randomized controlled clinical trial, which takes time. But she says at a time when fast answers can save lives, COVID19answers.org could help. And get this collaboration can draw from data on more than 29,000 hospitalized COVID-19 patients and compare it with data on about 45 million patients who are in the hospital for other reasons.
Day 3 of Judge Amy Coney Barrett's Supreme Court confirmation hearing is wrapped up. Today, she was hit with a barrage of questions on her judicial philosophy and how she might rule on future cases that could affect millions of Americans. ABC's Andrew Dimbert is in Washington with the latest.
Today, lawmakers getting their final crack at questioning Judge Amy Coney Barrett before her expected vote out of the Judiciary Committee.
That was Justice Scalia. So I share his philosophy, but I've never said that I would always reach the same outcome as he did.
Senate Republicans working to portray Barrett as an independent jurist without an agenda and who is able to separate her personal beliefs from her judicial rulings.
From a conservative point of view, generally speaking, we want legislative bodies to make laws, not judges. Is that correct?
That is correct.
For Democrats, the line of inquiry has largely focused on major Supreme Court decisions like the Affordable Care Act and Roe v. Wade and how she might potentially rule in the future. But Judge Barrett has largely declined to answer.
I don't think I've answered any legal hypotheticals.
The hearings have been mostly civil with a few impassioned clashes.
All these questions, you're suggesting that I have animus or that I cut a deal with the president. And I was very clear yesterday that that isn't what happened.
But despite some efforts to establish Barrett as a right-wing ideologue, her confirmation seems all but certain, as was evident by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island.
When you go up to the court, you will be not subject to the code of ethics that you're subject to now.
President Trump has previously suggested he could unilaterally change the date of the election, a power that resides exclusively with Congress. But for a second straight day, Judge Barrett has declined to answer that question.
Does the Constitution give the President of the United States the authority to unilaterally delay a general election under any circumstances?
It would be inappropriate for me to make a comment, and I don't think I've answered any legal hypotheticals in keeping with the Justice Ginsburg rule.
After questioning wraps up today, tomorrow we'll hear from legal experts before Judge Barrett has a closed-door FBI background check session. From there, she'll be voted out of committee, followed by a full Senate floor vote. And with that timeline, she is expected to be confirmed and take her seat on the bench with just days to spare before the election. Andrew Dimbert, ABC News, the Capitol.